I can still feel the smell of damp earth on my hands, the muffled sound of screams turning into pleas, then murmurs, and finally, silence. The shovel grew heavier with each pile of dirt I threw. It wasn't just the weight of the metal, it was the weight of what I was doing. But as I covered that makeshift grave in the backyard with moonlight as my only witness, I could only think of one thing. For the first time in my life, I was breathing. They weren't anymore. My name is Junior, but since I was little, everyone's known me as JJ. I'm 20 years old now, and it's been 6 months since I got out of juvenile detention. People look at me on the street and look away. Some whisper, others cross to the other side of the sidewalk. I understand on paper I'm a monster. The kid who buried his own parents alive. I guess you probably heard about my case in the news or seen it on the local broadcast. Teen buries parents alive in backyard, family horror, minor confesses to barbaric crime. But what you didn't hear, what nobody told you, was why. Not that it justifies it. Nothing justifies taking a life, let alone two. I know that. I learned that during the 17 months I spent locked up, staring at the ceiling of my room in the youth center and reliving every minute of that night. But before you judge me, before you decide I'm just another psychopath, I want you to hear my complete story. Not to defend myself, not to gain your sympathy. Just so you understand that sometimes the monster isn't born a monster. Sometimes he's created, molded, day after day, year after year, until something inside him breaks for good. I know you must be thinking, why should I listen to a murderer? And maybe you're right. Maybe I don't deserve to be heard. But still, I'm here in this empty park, telling my story to whoever wants to listen, to whoever has the courage to listen. If you're really paying attention to me, if you're willing to hear the side that was never told, I need you to like this video right now. Subscribe to Traumatic Accounts, turn on notifications, and comment where you're watching this from. I want to know who's really interested in the truth behind the headlines. Who has the courage to face what respectable families hide behind closed doors? And believe me, when I finish telling everything, you'll understand that hell isn't a place you go to. Sometimes it's the place where you're born and raised. And before you think I'm looking for excuses, I'm not. What I did was unforgivable, but what they did to me was too. And that's the part of the story nobody wanted to hear until now. I was born in a 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Detroit. From the outside, my family seemed normal, maybe even happy. My dad, Robert, worked as security at a mall. My mom, Celine, cleaned houses for families. I have a sister, Brianna, 2 years older than me. In photos from when I was little, up to about 5 years old, we're all smiling. It seemed like we had a common life, like any other family. I remember some good moments. My dad taking me to the park on Sundays, my mom making chocolate cake on my birthday, my sister teaching me to tie my shoes, small flashes of normalcy that today seem to have happened to someone else in another life. Everything started to change when I was 6 years old. My dad lost his job, started drinking. It wasn't just a beer after work. It was whiskey, from morning until he passed out at night. Money got tight. My mom had to take on more houses to clean. She'd leave before dawn and come back after I was already asleep. It was during that time that I met the rest of the family. When my mom started working more, we spent a lot of time at my paternal grandparents' house, Mr. Adam and Mrs. Cindy. At first, it seemed good. There was food on the table, there was TV, there were other cousins to play with, but I soon realized something was wrong in that house. My grandfather had an explosive temper. Anything was reason to yell, to break things, to threaten everyone. My grandmother, on the other hand, was silent, as if she were always absent, even when she was present. Later I understood she lived doped up on nerve pills, as they said. In my grandparents' house also lived 2 uncles, my dad's brothers, Uncle Marcus and Uncle Paul. Uncle Marcus was my grandfather's favorite, followed in his footsteps, had the same scary look. Uncle Paul was more reserved, kept to his corner, but there was something strange about the way he looked at me and my sister. There were also my cousins, Diego and Rafael, Uncle Marcus's sons, and Vanessa, Uncle Paul's daughter. Diego was 4 years older than me and from the start picked on me. Rafael was my age but always followed what his older brother ordered. Vanessa was the youngest, only 4 years old when we started going to the house. The first weeks at my grandparents' house were calm, then the games started. Diego and Rafael locked me in the dark basement for hours. They said it was just a game, that I was a crybaby for being afraid of the dark. When I came out trembling and crying, my grandfather laughed, He said that's how a man was made, facing his fears. Once I tried to tell my mom. She was so tired, so worried about bills, that she just said, "Don't make things up, JJ. Your grandmother and grandfather are doing a favor, taking care of you. Don't be ungrateful." My dad, when he wasn't drunk, was irritated or sleeping. It was no use talking to him. Any complaint became reason for him to yell at me, call me weak, say I needed to man up. My sister Brianna was the only one who understood me, who protected me when she could. But she also suffered at the hands of our cousins, my grandfather, my uncles. The difference is she was stronger than me, not physically, but inside. She had a resilience I never had. When I was 8 years old, my dad finally got another job as a truck driver. I thought things would get better, that we wouldn't need to go to my grandparents' house anymore. I was wrong. My dad spent weeks on the road. My mom continued with the house cleaning, and we, Brianna and I, remained trapped in that hell a few times a week. It was during that time that things got worse for good. My grandfather started using me as a punching bag when he was angry. He said it was to teach me discipline. My cousins started doing the same, beating me when no adult was looking. My grandmother saw everything and did nothing, just swallowed another pill and turned her face. Uncle Marcus encouraged his sons. "Let the boys sort it out," he'd say when my sister tried to defend me. Uncle Paul just watched from afar with that look that gave me chills. At home, things weren't better. When my dad came back from trips, he usually drank until he passed out. If I made noise, bothered him in some way, he exploded. I'll never forget the time I broke a glass in the kitchen. He dragged me by the arm to the backyard, made me kneel on the gravel, and pick up each piece of glass with my bare hands. "If you cut yourself, it's because you're really stupid," he yelled while my mom watched from the window doing nothing. My mom, she had a different form of cruelty. It wasn't physical like my dad's or my grandfather's. It was a coldness, an indifference that hurt more than any slap. She was always tired, always busy, always distant, but she found energy to criticize everything I did. "This boy is good for nothing," she'd say to the neighbors as if I wasn't there. "He just gives me trouble just like his father." The more time passed, the more I closed up. At school, I had no friends. How could I? I was always hurt, always scared, always trying to hide. The teachers even suspected something was wrong, but the few times they questioned, my mom was quick to make up excuses. He fell off his bike. He hurt himself playing ball. He's very clumsy. At 10 years old, I started having constant nightmares. I'd wake up screaming in the middle of the night, sweating, trembling. My dad would come into the room furious at being woken up and beat me to teach me to sleep right. My mom said I was being dramatic to get attention. Only Brianna comforted me when she could. She'd come to my bed after everyone was asleep, dry my tears, tell me stories so I'd fall back asleep. "One day we'll get out of here, JJ," she'd promise. "One day it'll be just you and me, far from everyone." I lived for that promise. It was the only thing that kept me going. When I turned 12, I discovered a secret that would change everything. I was looking for a notebook in my parents' bedroom drawer. I needed it for school and didn't have money to buy a new one. At the bottom of the drawer, I found a folder with documents, among them my birth certificate. The name that was there wasn't Robert. It was another, Maurice. The man I called Dad wasn't my biological father. I confronted my mom when she got home from work. First, she denied it. Then, seeing I had the proof in my hands, she slapped me across the face. "And what are you going to do with this information, smart-ass kid? Go look for your real father? He doesn't even know you exist. I was pregnant when I met Robert. He accepted you. You should be grateful instead of snooping through other people's things." Everything made sense. So that's why my dad, no, Robert, treated me differently than Brianna. The hatred in his eyes when he looked at me. I was living proof of my mom's betrayal, a constant reminder of another man. I wasn't his son. I was a burden he agreed to carry. That night, I made the worst possible choice. I told Robert. I was angry at my mom. I wanted to hurt her somehow. I waited for him to arrive from a trip, already half drunk, and dropped the bomb. "I know you're not my real father." What followed was the worst beating I'd ever suffered. He beat me until I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Broken arm, 3 cracked ribs, black eye, cut on my eyebrow that needed stitches. The official story was that I'd fallen down the stairs. The hospital social worker suspected, asked questions, but I was so scared that I confirmed my parents' version. What would happen to me if they got arrested? Where would I go? And Brianna, would we be separated? When I got back home, the dynamic had changed completely. Robert didn't even disguise the hatred he felt for me anymore. My mom blamed me for almost destroying the family. Only Brianna remained by my side, more protective than ever. It was during that time that I started going to the streets. I spent as much time as possible away from home. That's how I met Tiger, a local dealer. He was about 25 and ran operations in the neighborhood. At first, he just offered me a place to stay, food sometimes. Later, he started giving me small tasks, deliver packages, watch corners, warn when the police were around. I knew it was wrong, but for the first time in my life, someone treated me like I had value. Tiger said I was smart, reliable, things nobody had ever told me before. At home, the situation only got worse. Robert had lost his truck driver job. He drank and crashed the truck. He spent his days drinking and nights yelling. My mom worked more and more and blamed me for all the problems. If you didn't exist, you disgrace, I could have had a life. When we weren't at home, we were at my grandparents' house. The hell continued there. My grandfather, now older and more bitter, found new ways to humiliate me. My cousins, now teenagers like me, had new games. They locked me in the bathroom and threw buckets of cold water over the door. They hid my clothes while I showered, forcing me to come out wrapped in a towel to be the target of laughter. My uncles continued being the same terrible people. Uncle Marcus now used me as an errand boy for his shady business. Uncle Paul continued with that disturbing look. When I was 14 years old, I discovered another dark family secret. Brianna, my protector, my only safe harbor, was secretly saving money to run away. I don't blame her. She was already 16, soon to be 17, had endured longer than me in that hell. "I'll take you with me, JJ," she promised. "I just need to save a little more. On my 17th birthday, we disappear from here." I believed. It was the only hope I had left, but Robert discovered the hidden money. He accused Brianna of stealing from him. The argument was horrible. I tried to defend my sister and took a punch that knocked me out. When I came to, Brianna was on the living room floor bleeding from her nose, while Robert yelled that she was ungrateful. My mom just watched from the kitchen door expressionless. That night, after everyone slept, Brianna came to my room. Her face was swollen. There were marks on her neck. "I can't wait anymore, JJ. I need to leave now." I begged her to take me along. She cried, hugged me tight. "I can't, my little one. I don't have enough money for both of us, but I swear as soon as I get settled, I'll come back for you." She left that dawn, left a note saying she'd gone to live with a school friend, but I knew the truth. She'd run away as far as possible. With Brianna gone, there was nothing left to protect me. The violence at home increased. Robert blamed me for his daughter running away. "You and your ideas, you demon." My mom buried herself even deeper in work, spending days without showing up at home. At my grandparents' house, without Brianna to intervene, my cousins got bolder. The violence got worse and worse. Once they locked me in the basement for 2 whole days. Nobody noticed my absence, or worse, they noticed and didn't care. My refuge was the street, Tiger and his friends. I started using drugs to escape, to not feel. First marijuana, then heavier things. I missed school more and more. Eventually, I stopped going completely. At 15 years old, I was practically a ghost at home. I only showed up to sleep when I showed up. Robert and my mom barely noticed. They were too busy fighting with each other, sinking into their own problems. That's when Tiger made me a proposal. He needed someone to do a more serious job, break into a house, take some valuable items. "It's easy, kid. The house will be empty. You go in, grab what I show you in the photos, and get out. 10 minutes max." I accepted. Not for money, although Tiger promised good cash. I accepted because I had nothing left to lose. My life was already hell. What could get worse? The robbery went wrong. The house wasn't empty, as Tiger had said. The owner arrived, caught me red-handed, called the police. I was caught, booked, taken to trial. For being a minor and a first-time offender, I got 6 months in a youth detention center. I thought it would be the worst period of my life. I was wrong. For the first time, I had 3 meals a day, a bed of my own. Nobody beat me at night. I started having classes regularly. My family showed up only once for visitation. Robert and my mom seemed irritated at having to be there. "You're the family's shame. my mom whispered when the guard stepped away. I don't even know why we still bother. Neither of them came back after that. The 6 months passed, and when I got out, it was like a worse nightmare was starting, having to go back home. When I got out of the detention center, at 16 years old, things had changed at home. Robert had been unemployed for over a year. Alcoholism had evolved into serious health problems. He could barely get up from the couch. My mom had developed an addiction to pills, following in my grandmother's footsteps. The house was chaos, dirty, with overdue bills piled on the table. I tried to get a job, anything to save money and get out of there. But who would hire an ex-detainee without even finishing middle school? I went back to my grandparents' house, not by choice, but because at least there was food there. My grandfather, now almost 70 years old, was weaker, but no less cruel. My cousins, Diego and Rafael, had moved out, thank God. But Uncle Marcus and Uncle Paul were still there, each more bitter than the other. A few months after my release, I received a letter. It was from Brianna. After almost 2 years without news, she'd finally found me. She was living in Portland. She worked as a hotel receptionist. She'd started a new life, far from everything and everyone. I'm saving money, JJ, she wrote. Soon I'll be able to come get you. Hang on just a little longer. Don't do anything stupid. That letter gave me hope. For a few weeks I could endure. I went back to night school. I tried to do things right, but then the incident happened that would change everything. It was a Sunday. Robert had spent the little money my mom had left for the entire week on alcohol. When she came back and found out, a terrible fight started. He accused her of not being a good wife, of having cheated on him with me as proof. She yelled that he was a useless drunk who had ruined her life. At some point in the fight, Robert grabbed a knife. I don't know if he really intended to use it or was just trying to scare her, but I saw that scene and something inside me snapped. All the memories, all the abuse, all the neglect. I saw my mom, despite everything she had done or not done for me, about to be attacked. I got in the middle, took a cut on my arm. Nothing serious, but enough to bleed a lot. Robert stopped as if he'd woken from a trance, dropped the knife. My mom, instead of checking if I was okay, started yelling at me. Look what you did, always causing problems. Why can't you just stay in your corner? I left the house bleeding, wandering aimlessly through the neighborhood streets. I found Tiger on a corner. He looked at my arm, at the blood, and didn't ask anything. He just took me to his place, where a friend of his who was a nurse at a health clinic gave me some improvised stitches. I spent the night there drinking with Tiger, venting. I told him everything about Robert not being my biological father, about the years of abuse at my grandparents' house, about how my mom never protected me, about how I had nobody left except Brianna, who was too far away to help. Tiger listened to everything in silence. When I finished, he just said, "There are certain people who don't deserve to breathe the same air as us, partner. Sometimes the only solution is to remove the problem by the root." I didn't respond, but his words kept echoing in my head for days. I went back home 2 days later. Nobody had noticed my absence. Robert kept drinking, my mom kept taking pills and ignoring me. The only difference was the improvised bandage on my arm, which neither of them even mentioned. I spent the following weeks planning. At first, they were just revenge fantasies, ways to make my parents suffer like I had suffered. But soon the fantasies started taking concrete form. Tiger was right. Some people didn't deserve to keep living, not after what they'd done. Not after having destroyed so many lives. Mine. Brianna's. Probably others before us. I started observing their routine with different eyes, the moments when they were most vulnerable. Robert, too drunk to defend himself. My mom doped up on pills, the backyard isolated where nobody looked. I talked to Tiger about my ideas. I expected him to discourage me, to say I was crazy. Instead, he offered help. "I know some guys who can make a body disappear without leaving a trace," he said, as if we were talking about throwing out garbage. "But this is going to cost you. And it's not just money I'm talking about. After you do this, you'll have a debt to me, understand?" I understood and accepted anyway. The plan was simple. Wait for a night when both were incapacitated, Robert drunk, my mom doped. Use the chloroform that Tiger got me to make sure they didn't wake up. Take them to the backyard where I'd already have dug a grave during the day while they were out. Tie them up, throw them in the grave, partially cover with dirt, let them wake up, understand what was happening, and then complete the job. It was cruel. It was calculated. It was exactly what I believed they deserved. The chosen date was April 17th, an apparently ordinary day, but one I had selected carefully. It was the anniversary of my first hospitalization. After the beating I took from Robert when he found out he wasn't my biological father, I dug the hole the afternoon before while both were out. It wasn't difficult. The yard soil was soft and I had enough rage to give strength to each movement of the shovel. On the planned night, I waited until Robert passed out on the couch, as he always did after drinking almost an entire bottle of whiskey. My mom was already in the bedroom, had taken her sleeping pills. It was now or never. I used the chloroform, first on Robert. It was easier than expected. Already drunk, he didn't even react. Then I went to the bedroom where my mom slept. For a brief moment, seeing her there so vulnerable, I hesitated. But then I remembered all the times she had turned her back while I suffered, all the times she had said I was a mistake, a burden, something that shouldn't exist. The chloroform worked equally well on her. Dragging them to the backyard was the hardest part. Not because they were heavy, years of poor nutrition and addictions had left both almost skeletal, but because with each step a voice in my head screamed that I could stop, that there was still time to go back. I ignored the voice. I put them in the grave I had prepared. I tied their arms and legs with ropes that Tiger had given me. I waited. It didn't take long for the chloroform's effect to wear off. Robert woke up first, confused, trying to understand where he was. When he realized he was in a hole in the ground, tied up, he started screaming. I watched from the edge of the grave, silent. "What is this? What are you doing, you demon?" he yelled. My mom woke up with the screams. The panic in her eyes when she understood the situation was almost satisfying. Almost. "JJ, for God's sake, what is this?" "Get us out of here now," she begged. I didn't respond, just started throwing dirt on them slowly. "You always said I was a burden, Mom?" I finally spoke. "That your life would be better if I didn't exist. Now I'm going to make your life better another way." Robert alternated between screaming for help and cursing me. My mom just cried, begging, promising that things would be different. I kept throwing dirt, first covering their legs, then their torsos. The screams became more desperate, the pleas more frantic. When the dirt reached their necks, I stopped for a moment. "You ruined my life. Ruined Brianna's life. Now you're going to pay for it." The last shovelfuls of dirt covered their faces. The screams became muffled, then weak, then silent. I kept throwing dirt until the grave was completely covered. Then I sat next to the mound of fresh dirt and cried. Not from sadness or regret. I cried from relief, as if an enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Tiger showed up as planned, an hour later with 2 friends. They compacted the dirt better, spread leaves and branches on top to disguise the spot. That night, after Tiger and his friends left, I sat on the house porch, looking at the stars. I felt nothing, not relief, not guilt, not fear. It was as if my entire emotional system had shut down. I followed the plan we had elaborated. I took some clothes, my parents' documents, and some money I found hidden in their bedroom. I left the house as if I were going to school the next morning. Tiger hid me in an abandoned shack in the farthest part of the neighborhood. The plan was to wait a few weeks, give time for someone to miss my parents, and start a search. Meanwhile, I should keep my head down, not contact anyone. The first days were the strangest. The silence was deafening. For the first time in years, there were no screams, no insults, no constant fear, but there was also nothing else. It was like existing in a vacuum. On the 3rd day, the first news started circulating. A neighbor had found the silence in the house strange and called the police. They found signs of struggle in the living room that I myself had created, knocking over furniture and breaking some objects. The teenage son was missing. Initial suspicions pointed to a robbery gone wrong. A week later, the story was different. The police had found evidence that the bodies could be buried in the backyard. Search dogs were brought to the location. They dug exactly where I had buried my parents. The next morning, my photo was in all the local papers. Teen suspected of killing and burying own parents sought by police. Tiger showed up at the shack nervous. "We need to get you out of here, kid. This is getting too hot." That's when the first cracks in my emotional state started to appear. What I had done really started to sink in. It wasn't a fantasy, it wasn't a dream. I had really killed my parents, buried them alive. "I don't want to run," I told Tiger. I have nowhere to go. He tried to convince me to cross the border, go to Mexico or Canada, said he knew people who could help me, but I knew it would be a life of constantly looking over my shoulder, a life not worth living. On the 10th day after the murders, I made my decision. I thanked Tiger for everything, said I was going to resolve things my way. He understood the message, but before leaving he reminded me, "You have a debt to me, JJ. When this is all over, if you can, remember that." I went to the nearest police station. I walked in and said simply, "I'm Junior Silva. You're looking for me." What followed was a whirlwind. Interrogations, exams, psychologists, state-appointed lawyers. I told everything, not just about the murders, but about all the years of abuse, about my grandparents' house, about Tiger, although I minimized his role, said he had just sold me the chloroform without knowing what I'd use it for. Because I was a minor, had just turned 17 when I committed the crimes, I was sent to the juvenile justice system, not the adult penitentiary system. The sentence, 3 years detention, the maximum provided by juvenile law for minor offenders. The trial was quick, since I confessed everything. I was lucky to get a judge who considered mitigating circumstances. The years of documented abuse, my hospital records that evidenced domestic violence, neighbors' testimonies that confirmed hearing screams and constant fights in the house. During the process, a revelation hit me like a punch. Brianna had tried to contact me several times in recent months without success. When she learned what had happened through the news, she came back immediately. She was there in the courtroom when I was sentenced. Our eyes met for a brief moment. I couldn't decipher what I saw in them. Fear, disappointment, understanding. She didn't come talk to me. I don't blame her. What I had done was unforgivable, even with all the justifications. Knowing Brianna was nearby, that she had come back, gave me a bittersweet feeling. On one hand, it meant she still cared. On the other, I knew I had destroyed any chance of having the life together she had promised. The 3 years in the detention center were, ironically, the most structured of my life. I had regular psychological counseling, completed my studies, learned a trade, carpentry. I had adequate nutrition, a routine, clear limits. The anger and emptiness that consumed me gradually gave way to something more complex. It didn't amount to regret. I still believed Robert and Celine deserved what they got. But it was a kind of mourning. Mourning for what could have been. For the family we never had. For the childhood that was stolen from me. In the first months, I had constant nightmares. I dreamed of my parents coming out of the earth covered in mud, chasing me. I'd wake up screaming, sweating, but with time and therapy, the nightmares decreased. In the second year of detention, I received a letter from Brianna. She had settled again in Detroit, worked as an administrative assistant, and went to college at night. She said when I got out we could talk, that she didn't judge me, but needed time to process everything. That letter was my turning point. I realized I still had something to live for. Someone who, despite everything, still cared. I started to really dedicate myself to my recovery, not just follow the program out of obligation. In the last year of detention, I started working as an assistant in the center's carpentry shop. Working with wood was therapeutic, transforming something raw into something useful, beautiful. It was as if somehow I was trying to do the same with myself. At times I thought about Tiger and the debt I had with him. I knew when I got out he'd probably come collect, but I decided that whatever happened, I wouldn't go back to that life. I already had enough blood on my hands. I got out of the detention center 6 months ago, at 20 years old just turned. The world outside seemed scary after so long confined. The streets were different, people seemed to walk faster, sounds were louder. During my time in the center, I had intensive therapy sessions. The diagnosis: complex post-traumatic stress disorder, result of years of abuse. Not that it justified what I did. Nothing justifies it, but it helped understand the mechanisms behind my actions. The first weeks in freedom were the hardest. I stayed in a halfway house since I had nowhere to go. Brianna had visited me a few times during the last year of detention, but our conversations were always tense, superficial. She tried, I know she did. But the ghost of what I had done was always present between us. I got a job in a small carpentry shop on the other side of the city, far from my old neighborhood. The owner, Mr. Anthony, knew about my past. The system requires transparency, but he still gave me a chance. Everyone deserves a fresh start, he said on the first day. What matters is who you choose to be now. I rented a simple room near work. It's small, basic, but it's mine. It's the first place in my life I can really call my own, where nobody yells at me, where I can sleep without fear. I continue with therapy now at a mental health clinic. The system will monitor me until I turn 21, part of supervised release. Sometimes I still have nightmares. I still see my parents accusing me. I still hear their last screams muffled by the earth, but I'm learning to live with these memories. Brianna and I are trying to rebuild some kind of relationship. She invited me to dinner at her apartment a few times. It's strange, uncomfortable. There are moments of silence that seem to last an eternity. But there are also moments when we laugh at some good childhood memory, however rare they were. I never went back to the old neighborhood. I heard the house was sold, that another family lives there now. Sometimes I wonder if they know what happened there, if they feel something strange in the backyard. About Tiger, I haven't had any more news. A colleague from the center who got out before me told me he'd been arrested in a big operation. Got many years. Others say he fled to Mexico. I don't know what's true, and honestly, I prefer not to know. As for my grandparents, uncles, and cousins, I completely cut contact. I don't want to know about them. Don't want them to know about me. That part of my life is buried along with my parents. Looking back at everything that happened, I still can't say for sure what I feel. It's not regret. Not exactly. It's more complex than that. I know what I did was terrible, unforgivable. I know I took 2 lives, however much those lives did harm to me and others. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been different if someone had listened to me before, if some teacher, neighbor, or social worker had seen the signs and intervened. If Brianna hadn't been forced to run away alone, if there had been any other way out besides the one I chose. Other times I wonder about my biological father, this Maurice guy who doesn't even know I exist. Is he like me? Does he have the same temperament? Or am I more like Robert than I'd like to admit? Is violence in my blood, or was it put there by years of abuse? Now, at 20 years old, I try to rebuild some kind of life. Not a normal life. That will never be possible for someone with my history. But a life where I can at least not cause more pain. A life where I can perhaps do something good to compensate for the evil I did. I know there will always be people who look at me and see only a monster. And maybe they're right. Maybe I am a monster. But if I am, I was a monster created, not born. I've been sitting in this empty park for hours, telling my story. The sun is already setting. Soon it will get dark. People pass by far away, avoid looking at me. I think there's something in my eyes that reveals what I did, something that says, beware. If you made it this far and really understood everything I went through, I ask you to like this video right now. Subscribe to Traumatic Accounts, turn on notifications, and comment what time it is where you're watching this. I know my story is hard to hear. I know many will judge, will condemn, but if at least one person understands that the monster isn't always born a monster, that sometimes he's molded by pain, by abandonment, by cruelty, then it will have been worth telling all this. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for understanding. I'm just telling what happened the way it happened. The judgment is yours. Night is coming. I need to go back to my room, to the small life I'm trying to build from the ashes of the old one. Tomorrow is another day. Another day trying to live with what I did. Another day carrying the weight of my choices. Another day being Junior, the kid who buried his parents alive. No matter how many years pass, I think I'll always be known like that. And maybe that's fair. Maybe that's the price to pay for what I did. But I hope that one day I can also be known as someone who tried to fix what could be fixed, who tried not to allow the cycle of violence to continue. Because if I learned anything from all this, it was that violence only generates more violence. And at some point, someone needs to have the courage to break that cycle. Even if it's too late for me, maybe it's not too late for someone listening to this story. Maybe, just maybe, telling all this has some meaning, beyond just being the confession of a murderer.